Move it before she touches it. Victor Sloane's order cut across the convention hall as two stagehands grabbed the homemade ramp beneath Lily Carter's front wheels. Ethan Brooks dropped to one knee, his flannel sleeve scraping the floor, and pressed his calloused palm against the unfinished pine. Black anti-slip strips crossed the slope. Flattened screw heads caught the LED light. "Don't move the road while someone is standing at the edge of it," he said. Lily tightened her hands around the wheel rims. "I'm right here." 3 hours earlier, the convention center had smelled of fresh carpet, electrical dust, and the bitter coffee left cooling beside the loading doors. Ethan had arrived through the service entrance with a dented toolbox in one hand and a steel tape measure clipped to his faded jeans. He had been hired to repair a backstage door that dragged across the floor every time it opened. It was ordinary work, the kind that paid without asking anyone to notice the man doing it. Above him, workers tested the giant screen for the evening's awards ceremony. Every voice deserves the stage glowed in clean white letters while a microphone squealed once, then settled into silence. Caleb waited near the tool cases, holding his father's rolled extension cord with both hands. At 10, he knew better than to wander through a working stage. He watched, asked before touching anything, and kept Ethan's pencil tucked safely behind his own ear when it fell. Ethan had just lifted the warped door on its hinges when he heard a sound that did not belong. A dry metallic click from beneath the stage, followed by the soft scrape of rubber tires stopping against carpet. Lily sat at the eastern side of the platform, a blue ribbon tied behind her white wheelchair. She was studying the 12-inch rise to the stage while a young employee pointed toward the freight area. "We can use the equipment lift," the employee said. "3 people can hold the chair." Lily's shoulders went still. "I'm not cargo." The employee's smile tightened, polite and practiced. "It's only a temporary accommodation." Ethan looked from the lift's scratched metal platform to Lily's hands resting on the wheel rims. Then he measured the open space beside the stage without being asked. He said little. He checked the height, the available run, and the width between 2 lighting stands. The numbers told him what the room's expensive banners did not. Someone had invited Lily to the stage without building her a way to reach it. "You're the carpenter?" Lily asked. "Today," Ethan replied. "Can you fix it?" He looked at the unused pine stacked near the fabrication crates, then at the time on the wall clock. "I can build something safe enough to be tested. Not promised. Tested." That distinction mattered to him. Victor appeared minutes later in a charcoal suit, carrying a tablet against his chest like a shield. His voice remained warm as he approved Ethan using leftover material for a temporary backstage solution, though his eyes never left the schedule on the screen. He did not ask for the measurements. He did not look at Lily. He only said the structure had to disappear before the sponsors arrived. Ethan crouched beside the lumber and ran his thumb over a dark factory stamp on the underside of the first board. Caleb leaned closer but kept his hands to himself. "Dad," he whispered. "Isn't that the same name printed under the big stage?" Ethan wiped away the sawdust. The code on the board matched the material tag attached to the convention center's professional platform. And beneath the polished stage, another metallic click sounded, this time followed by a half-inch shift in the dust around one steel support. The steel support shifted again, leaving a clean crescent in the gray dust beneath the polished stage. Ethan lowered himself beside it, but before he could touch the locking pin, Victor Sloane's dress shoes stopped inches from his hand. "That area is restricted." The support moved. "The stage has already been inspected." Fluorescent light trembled across the steel frame, and somewhere above them, a technician rolled a road case over the platform with a hollow thunder. Ethan rose slowly, wiping dust onto the thigh of his faded jeans. Then it should not be difficult to inspect it again. Victor's smile stayed in place, thin and professional. He turned toward the nearest crew member rather than answering Ethan. "Please escort our carpenter back to the door repair. We cannot have unauthorized contractors creating safety concerns before guests arrive." The words were smooth enough to sound responsible. The implication was not. Ethan had noticed a structural shift, yet within seconds he had become the concern. Caleb stood beside the fabrication crates, still holding the extension cord. His eyes moved from Victor's tailored suit to the dust on his father's sleeve. "Dad only looked because it made a noise," he said quietly. Ethan gave his son a small shake of the head. Not a rebuke, just a reminder that Caleb did not have to defend him against adults. Then he took the pencil from behind Caleb's ear, tucked it into his own, and placed one steady hand on the boy's shoulder. "You did right by noticing," he said. "Now stay behind the tape." Near the eastern edge of the stage, Lily watched two employees wheel a freestanding photo backdrop into the aisle. Marina Cole adjusted its angle until the printed gold columns almost matched the real stage behind it. "We have a graceful solution," she told Lily. "The MC can come down to you. We'll lower the lights, frame the photograph tightly, and no one will feel that the moment is any less special." Lily glanced at the 12-inch rise separating her from every other honoree. "Will the other winners be down here?" Marina's fingers paused on the edge of the backdrop. "Your circumstances are different. My award isn't." The room seemed to breathe around that sentence. Air conditioning hummed through ceiling vents, carrying the smell of fresh carpet glue and hot electrical cables. Ethan looked at Lily, but he did not answer for her. Victor stepped between them with the calm expression of a man accustomed to turning objections into scheduling problems. "Miss Carter, this is about keeping you safe. A floor presentation is an accommodation, not an exclusion." He lifted the printed program from a nearby chair and tapped her name with one polished fingernail. Beside it, a red wheelchair symbol had been written by hand. "You see? Your needs have been noted." Ethan's gaze settled on that mark. Victor had said moments earlier that no one had known a wheelchair user would need stage access. Yet someone had marked Lily's name before the program reached the ballroom. A narrow card slipped from between the pages and fluttered onto the carpet. Ethan bent, picked it up, and read the typed line before Marina reached for it. "Floor presentation option approved if East access unavailable." Marina took the card with a quick, apologetic smile. "Internal staging note. Nothing more." "Approved by whom?" Ethan asked. Victor's eyes hardened for less than a second, then softened again. "Mr. Brooks, you were hired for carpentry maintenance, not event administration." A stagehand near the lighting tower murmured to another, not quite softly enough. "Guy finds scrap wood and thinks he's an engineer." The second man looked at Ethan's worn work boots and gave a short laugh. Ethan heard them. Caleb heard them too. Ethan simply crouched beside Lily's chair and placed the recovered program carefully across her knees, making sure it did not catch against the blue ribbon tied behind her seat. "Where do you want to receive it?" he asked. Lily looked up at the stage. "Up there, where they invited me." At the side entrance, Margaret Carter lowered her phone after silently photographing the staging card before Marina removed it. She still did not step forward. She had watched Ethan accept the insult without shrinking, protect Caleb from the argument, and return Lily's choice to her instead of claiming it for himself. None of that proved his ramp was safe. But Victor's answer had come too quickly, and the red symbol beside Lily's name now looked less like consideration than advance warning. As Victor turned away, the tablet under his arm lit briefly with the event schedule. Ethan caught one line before the screen went dark. "East Access Revision Approved v. Sloan." "East Access Revision Approved v. Sloan." The words vanished when Victor's tablet went dark, but Ethan had already seen them. He did not call after the event manager or accuse him in front of the crew. He simply watched Victor cross the ballroom beneath the glowing promise on the screen, then reached into his flannel pocket and felt the folded hardware store receipt pressed against his carpenter's pencil. $64. Caleb's winter shoes had been $72. "Dad," Caleb whispered, looking toward the service doors, "we could still take the screws back." Ethan glanced at his son's sneakers, the rubber separating slightly near one toe. The boy had tried to hide it with a strip of black tape that morning. Ethan knelt and pressed the loose edge flat with his thumb. "Not after they've done their job," he said. Caleb looked at the unfinished ramp, then at Lily waiting beneath the stage lights. "What about my shoes?" "That's my problem to solve, not hers." He stood and carried the program back to Lily, placing it carefully across her knees without touching the controls or handles of her chair. The blue ribbon behind her seat had slipped close to one wheel. Ethan tucked it safely around the push bar, slow enough for her to see what he was doing. "Thank you," she said. "For the ribbon? For asking me what I wanted." Around them, the convention hall kept moving as if nothing important had happened. Road cases rattled over seams in the carpet. A florist sprayed water onto white roses. Marina tested the false backdrop from 3 different camera angles, while Victor spoke into his headset about preserving the schedule. Ethan returned to the pine boards. He checked the low handrail, found one edge rougher than he liked, and worked it smooth with fine sandpaper. Sawdust gathered in the creases of his knuckles. No one applauded. No one even stopped. Adrian Vale had not yet been called to inspect the ramp, and Margaret Carter still stood near the side entrance without identifying herself. From where she watched, Ethan appeared to be nothing more than a tired tradesman correcting a small imperfection everyone else had decided was irrelevant. Victor noticed him sanding and gave a restrained sigh. "Mr. Brooks, the temporary structure is no longer part of the event plan." Ethan kept his eyes on the grain. "The edge can still cut someone while it's here. It will be removed. Then I'll make it safe to remove." Victor's mouth tightened. "You are putting a great deal of effort into scrap wood." Ethan ran, his bare palm along the rail again. "Splinters don't care what the wood cost." Marina looked away, perhaps embarrassed, perhaps merely busy. Margaret did not. She watched Ethan turn the ramp on its side and discover that one diagonal brace shifted under pressure. He could have left it. Victor had already rejected the structure. Lily had been offered another arrangement. Ethan's paid assignment was still the warped backstage door. Instead, he removed 4 new screws, lifted the brace free, reset the angle, and drove the screws back through fresh holes so the weakened fibers would not carry the load. Caleb held the flashlight from behind the safety tape, careful not to step closer. "A little left," Ethan told him. Caleb adjusted the beam. "There. Perfect." The word brought a small smile to the boy's face. Ethan tightened the final screw, then folded the receipt along its original crease and slipped it back into his pocket. Lily had offered to reimburse him earlier, when she saw the store bag beneath the workbench. He had refused before hearing her last name, before seeing Margaret, before knowing anyone important might be watching. "You could at least let me pay for the materials," Lily had said. Ethan had looked at the stage and then at the freight lift they wanted to use for her. "You were invited here," he had answered. "You shouldn't have to purchase the last 12 inches. Now Margaret's gaze moved from Ethan's worn boots to Caleb's taped sneaker, then to the small white receipt protruding from Ethan's pocket. She still had no proof the ramp could bear Lily's weight. She still did not know whether Ethan had the authority to build it. But she had just watched a man spend money his own child needed, refuse repayment from a stranger, and repair a structure everyone else had already dismissed, because someone could still be hurt while removing it. As Ethan lowered the ramp back onto the carpet, Caleb brushed sawdust from the underside and exposed the dark factory stamp again. Ethan placed his thumb beside the code, then looked toward the polished stage platform. The numbers matched exactly. The scrap wood Victor had called unsafe had come from the same certified shipment supporting the stage above them. The matching factory codes should have helped Ethan. Instead, they gave Victor Sloan a cleaner way to discredit him. "So you used structural material without authorization. It was listed as surplus. You altered property belonging to the event contractor." Victor's tone remained measured, almost patient, as if explaining policy to someone who had confused good intentions with permission. The unfinished ramp rested between them beneath the cold spill of the LED screen, its black anti-slip strips absorbing the light while the polished stage above reflected it. Ethan kept one hand on the pine rail. "Is the material unsafe?" he asked. "Or was I not supposed to notice where it came from?" The question slowed the room. Victor's expression did not change, but his thumb pressed harder against the edge of his tablet. Adrian Vale arrived carrying a digital level and a red inspection case. He was lean, silver-haired, and careful with his words, the kind of man who trusted load charts more than stories. He examined Ethan's flannel shirt, the hand-drawn measurements, and the ramp built from leftover stock. There was no contempt in his face, only professional doubt. Who calculated the rise? I did. Licensed engineer? Carpenter. Then we measure everything. Ethan nodded once. That's what I asked for. Adrian placed the level along the slope. The device gave a soft electronic chirp. He measured the width, the run, the handrail height, and the spacing between braces. Ethan did not stand over him or explain every choice. He stepped back, kept Caleb behind the safety tape, and let the numbers speak without protecting them. Margaret remained near the side entrance, watching through the shoulders of arriving staff. She had photographed the staging card and seen the revision line on Victor's tablet, but neither proved Ethan's ramp was safe. A man could be kind and still be wrong. A company could mishandle access and still have legitimate reasons to stop an unapproved structure. She folded her arms and waited. Adrian crouched beside the final brace and pressed against it. This corner needs another angle bracket. No, Ethan said. I marked it before they tried to move the ramp. He pointed to a small pencil circle near the joint. The honesty made Adrian glance up. Most men defending their work hid weaknesses. Ethan had labeled his. From behind the tape, Caleb lifted one finger but waited until his father looked at him. That mark was there before Mr. Sloan came over, he said. Dad said nobody could use it until he fixed that part. Ethan gave him a quiet nod, then returned his attention to Adrian. Victor smiled faintly. Children remember things in ways that support their parents. He's not certifying the ramp, Ethan said. He's telling you when the pencil mark appeared. Adrian continued measuring. The slope differed from Ethan's drawing by less than a quarter inch. He checked again, then opened the event's technical binder to compare the platform height and approved access dimensions. The pages turned with a dry paper whisper. 1, 2, 4, 5. Adrian stopped. He ran his thumb over the binding holes, then flipped backward. Where is page 3? Victor answered before anyone else could speak. A visual rendering. Nothing structural. Adrian looked at him. I haven't said what was on it. For the first time, Margaret's gaze moved fully from Ethan to Victor. The event manager adjusted his cuff and stepped closer to the binder. I approved the final packet. I know the contents. Then you know why the numbering jumps, Adrian said. Victor reached for the folder, but Ethan noticed a narrow strip of blue handwriting visible where page 2 had been folded back too sharply. He did not grab the binder. He only moved beneath the stronger work light and held the page flat with 2 fingertips. At the inner margin, half hidden by the binding, for words remained, East access removed, visual footprint. Marina culinaled softly. Victor called it an old production note, the kind left behind when layouts changed. His explanation sounded reasonable, but he made one mistake. The east ramp interfered with the sponsor wall, he said. No one had yet called the missing access point a ramp. Adrian looked toward the blank space beside the stage, then at Ethan's pencil drawing. Margaret lowered her arms. And Ethan understood that page 3 had not vanished because someone forgot to file it. It had vanished because the homemade ramp had rebuilt something the official design had deliberately erased. The words East access removed. Visual footprint remained under the work light like a stain no one could wipe away. Victor Sloan closed the technical binder with deliberate care. We are not going to turn an outdated production note into a public accusation. Then let the test decide what is current, Ethan said. Measure both structures. Adrian Vale looked from the homemade ramp to the polished stage above it. The air conditioner hummed through the sudden quiet, and somewhere near the loading doors, a rolling case stopped halfway across the carpet. Victor kept his expression composed. A controlled load test is reasonable. After that, we return to the approved program. His voice made the offer sound generous, almost final. Ethan did not argue. He asked for a utility cart, 2 sealed lighting cases, and the digital load gauge from Adrian's red inspection kit. Together, the cases weighed more than Lily and her wheelchair combined. Ethan checked every latch on the cart, pressed the tires with his thumb, then tightened the final angle bracket he had marked in pencil. He did not invite applause or announce what the ramp could hold. He only said, "No one stands downhill." Caleb moved behind the safety tape without being reminded. His shoulders had been tight since the men laughed at his father's work, but now he watched Ethan settle into the familiar rhythm of measuring, checking, and doing one thing at a time. Lily waited several feet away, hands folded loosely over the wheel rims. Margaret remained near the side aisle, her phone lowered but ready. Adrian placed the gauge beneath the center span. "First pass," he said. Ethan pushed the loaded cart up the incline. The wheels crossed the black anti-slip strips with a soft, even thump. Halfway up, he stopped and held the cart motionless. The pine flexed slightly, then settled. Adrian read the gauge. "Within limit." Victor folded his hands. "One pass proves very little." "Agreed," Ethan said. He backed the cart down slowly, checked the anchor point, and repeated the test. The second pass held. On the third, he stopped at the steepest point and released one hand from the cart long enough to press the rail, testing for lateral movement. Nothing shifted. The whispering near the lighting tower faded. A technician who had mocked the ramp lowered his coffee without taking a drink. Adrian studied the numbers, then signed his initials beside them. "The structure is stable under this load." It was not a final certification. It did not prove who removed page 3 or why. But it proved Ethan had not built carelessly, and it proved Victor's public claim that the ramp was obviously unsafe had no measurement behind it. Victor's jaw tightened almost invisibly. "Good. Then we can dismantle it safely and discuss the remaining concerns in private." Ethan looked toward Lily. "Her concern is not private." Before Victor could answer, a crew of 3 crossed the stage carrying a floral arch. The metal platform gave a faint snap. A water glass on the podium trembled, slid 2 inches, and tipped onto its side. The spill ran across the black surface in a thin silver sheet. Ethan's head turned before anyone else moved. "Stop walking." The crew froze. "Everyone off the stage," he said. Victor stepped forward. "Mr. Brooks, do not issue instructions to my staff." Another dry click sounded below them. Ethan did not raise his voice. "Then you tell them." Adrian heard it too. His face changed. He crossed to the stage edge, and the 2 men crouched beneath the platform. Dust floated in the beam of Caleb's flashlight. One steel support stood slightly outside the pale rectangle where it had rested earlier. The locking pin had not seated fully into its groove. Adrian touched the empty inspection box on the service log clipped nearby. "Locking pins verified," he read. "No initials." Victor appeared behind them, still calm, still professional. "The morning crew may have missed a mark. We can correct that without alarming the room." Ethan placed one hand against the support but did not move it. "How long has it been carrying people like this?" Victor did not answer. Adrian measured the shift, nearly half an inch. Above them, the LED screen continued glowing with its promise that every voice deserved the stage, while the expensive structure beneath it rested on a support no one had properly checked. Margaret slowly set the photographed binder page beside the test results on a nearby table. She looked at Ethan differently now, not because he had defeated anyone, but because the moment his own ramp was cleared, he stopped defending it and protected everyone standing above him. Victor turned toward Marina and spoke under his breath, believing the ventilation fans would cover the words. Caleb's phone, still recording the test from behind the tape, caught them clearly. "Do not let Carter see the original layout." Margaret heard her last name, and for the first time, Ethan saw the woman at the side aisle stop watching like a guest and begin listening like someone the entire building answered to. "Do not let Carter see the original layout." The sentence remained on Caleb's phone after Victor walked away, his voice flattened by the tiny speaker, but unmistakable beneath the ventilation hum. Ethan listened once, then stopped the playback. He did not lift the phone toward the room. He did not call Victor back. He looked first at Caleb, whose fingers had tightened around the device. "You did nothing wrong," Ethan said. "But this stays with the adults now." Caleb nodded and handed it over. Margaret Carter stood several yards away, one hand resting on the edge of the evidence table. The missing page photograph, Adrian's load test figures, and the unsigned stage inspection log lay beneath the white conference lights. Her last name had changed the temperature of the room, but she still had not explained why. "Who is Carter?" Ethan asked. Margaret's gaze moved to Lily. "I am." Victor turned too quickly. His professional smile returned, but not evenly. "Ms. Carter, I was not aware you had arrived." That was evident. She did not raise her voice. The printer behind the registration desk finished one page and fell silent. Even the loose plastic badge sleeves stopped rustling. Margaret stepped closer to the table and showed Adrian a black corporate credential from inside her jacket. The Carter Meridian logo matched the sponsor mark glowing across the LED wall. "I need the archived design history," she said. "Every revision, every approval, every invoice tied to East Access." Marina stared at the badge, then at Lily. Understanding crossed her face slowly. Victor moved between Margaret and the technical binder without appearing to block her. "This is a sensitive internal matter. We can review it privately after the ceremony." Ethan watched Margaret's expression. She was not looking at him with gratitude. She was looking at the evidence with the caution of someone who knew that power could become another way to distort the truth. "Privately is how it became invisible," she said. Adrian used his credentials to open the archived production folder on a service laptop. The screen cast a cold blue reflection across the glass wall behind them. Revision files appeared in a vertical list, each stamped with a time, an editor, and a reason code. Page 3 returned first. The original rendering showed a permanent access ramp built into the east side of the stage, wide enough for a wheelchair and aligned with the award entrance. The next revision removed it. A note beneath the change read, "Sponsor wall expanded for cleaner broadcast frame." Victor exhaled through his nose. That was an early option. The final footprint required adjustments. Adrian opened the attached email chain. Victor's name appeared at the top. His message proposed removing the ramp, moving the accessibility cost into LED branding, and using a floor-level presentation for mobility-limited recipients. Lily's face tightened at the phrase. Ethan saw it and quietly turned the laptop a few degrees so she could read the document without anyone reading her reaction. The next file was an invoice. The ramp budget had not disappeared. It had been reassigned to the illuminated logo wall now towering above them. Margaret placed 2 fingers on the table, steadying herself. "Who approved the transfer?" Victor loosened his tie by less than an inch. "There were several stakeholders." "Name them." The client requested a stronger visual presence. Adrian scrolled lower. The approval field carried Victor's digital signature, followed by a vague line. "Client visual priority confirmed verbally." No client name appeared. Marina looked down. "He told us Carter Meridian wanted it." Victor's voice sharpened for the first time, though he kept it low. "Marina, be careful not to mischaracterize production discussions." Ethan could have played Caleb's recording then. He could have watched Victor's explanation collapse in front of Margaret and the crew. Instead, he folded the hardware store receipt beside the invoice and asked Adrian to verify the timestamps. The receipt showed Ethan purchased the screws at 3:42, before Margaret entered the hall and before anyone had told him Lily's last name. The archived email showed Victor removed the official ramp 6 weeks earlier. One small act of kindness and one concealed decision now lay side by side on the table. Margaret looked from the $64 receipt to Caleb's taped sneaker, then back to Ethan. She did not pity him. She understood the sequence. He had built the ramp without knowing whose daughter needed it, while Victor had erased one after knowing someone would. "There is more," Marina said. Her voice was barely above the hum of the screen. She admitted the morning rehearsal camera had recorded Lily arriving, asking for stage access, and being redirected to the floor. The file had been labeled not for use after Victor reviewed it. Victor reached for his phone. That recording may have been altered outside protocol. Margaret's eyes narrowed. "Then preserve the server log." Victor stopped moving. Ethan handed Caleb's phone to Adrian, but kept his palm over the screen. Copy the audio. Blur my son. Remove his voice if you can. Mr. Brooks, Margaret said. That video could help prove what happened. Then use what proves it, Ethan replied. Not him. For the first time, Margaret looked at Ethan not as a contractor, not as a struggling father, and not as the man who had built the ramp. She looked at him as the only person in the room still protecting someone who could not protect himself from the story growing around him. Adrian confirmed the email timestamps, the invoice transfer, and the untouched metadata on Caleb's recording. Then Marina logged into the rehearsal archive. A single video file appeared on the screen, marked not for use with a system checksum beside it. Victor asked that the discussion move behind closed doors before guests entered. Margaret looked through the glass wall at the ballroom filling with donors, employees, cameras, and the giant promise that every voice deserved the stage. No, she said. The decision was hidden in public. The truth will be shown there too. The ballroom doors opened at 7 minutes past the scheduled start, and the convention hall filled with the controlled murmur of donors, employees, camera crews, and families finding their assigned seats. The homemade ramp remained at the eastern edge of the stage under a narrow work light, unfinished pine against polished black flooring, while Ethan Brooks stood beside it in his faded flannel shirt with sawdust still caught in the seams of his hands. He did not look like a man arriving to win. He looked tired, watchful, and unwilling to leave Lily alone at the foot of a stage that had already decided where she belonged. Victor Sloan walked to the center microphone before Margaret could speak. Ladies and gentlemen, we are addressing a last-minute accessibility concern, he said, his voice smooth through the ballroom speakers. An unauthorized structure was constructed by an outside contractor without formal approval. Out of caution, we proposed a safe floor-level presentation while our team reviewed the matter. Several guests turned toward Ethan. A camera shifted its lens from the stage to his worn boots. Victor's explanation was clean, reasonable, and nearly enough to restore the old balance of power. He displayed the event safety policy on the LED screen and pointed to the line requiring written approval for temporary structures. No one is being excluded, he continued. We are following procedure. For a moment, it sounded as though the story might end there, with Ethan reduced to a well-meaning carpenter who had overstepped and Victor appearing responsible for preventing risk. Ethan did not approach the microphone. He rested one hand on the low wooden rail and waited while Adrian Vale placed the signed load test sheet on the podium. Margaret stood near the front row, close enough to intervene but silent, watching to see whether Victor would correct himself when given one final chance. He did not. The test was limited, Victor said. It does not replace formal authorization. Adrian nodded. That is true. A faint release moved through Victor's shoulders. Then Adrian added, it also showed the ramp remained stable under a load greater than the intended use, while the approved stage had an unsecured support and an incomplete inspection log. The room quieted. Someone near the aisle stopped dragging a chair. The ventilation system became suddenly audible above the crowd. Victor turned toward Adrian with a strained expression of patience. A minor installation issue was corrected immediately. It has no connection to the access decision. Then we should look at the access decision, Margaret said. She stepped into the aisle, still without announcing who Lily was to her. On the screen appeared the photograph of the printed program. Lily Carter's name sat beside the red wheelchair symbol. Beneath it came the staging card. Floor presentation option approved if east access unavailable. Victor spread one hand. A contingency plan. Responsible events prepare alternatives. Ethan finally spoke. When was the east access declared unavailable? Victor looked at him. During final production review. Before or after she was invited? The question landed without force, which made it harder to evade. Victor answered that layout changes were common and that no individual recipient had been targeted. Margaret signaled the technician. The hardware store receipt appeared next, its timestamp enlarged beneath Ethan's name. 3:42 p.m. $64 in screws, brackets, anti-slip tape, and sandpaper. Beside it, the archived design revision showed the official ramp removed 6 weeks earlier. This proves Mr. Brooks acted without approval, Victor said quickly. It also proves, Margaret replied, that he acted before anyone told him who Lily was. A whisper moved through the audience. Ethan glanced back at Caleb, who stood safely beside Marina near the technical table. The boy held his father's steel tape measure against his chest but said nothing. He had already given enough. Victor shifted his argument again. He said the original ramp had been removed at the client's request to improve visibility, that budget decisions had been made collectively, and that the floor presentation preserved dignity without compromising safety. For a second time, the explanation found its footing. Corporate decisions were rarely made by one person. Visual changes were normal. A close camera angle could be described as practical rather than deceptive. Then Margaret placed the missing page on the screen. East Access removed visual footprint. The next image was the invoice transferring the ramp budget to the illuminated sponsor wall glowing behind Victor's head. You said the client requested this, she told him. Which client? Victor's eyes moved toward the cameras. Carter Meridian's visual priorities were communicated verbally. Margaret took one step closer to the stage. I am Margaret Carter, Chief Executive Officer of Carter Meridian Group. The audience went still. Lily lowered her eyes for a breath, then looked back at the ramp. Margaret continued, No one from my office authorized the removal of accessible entry. Victor's face did not collapse. He held on to procedure. Then there has been a breakdown in communication, and I regret the misunderstanding. But we should not conduct an internal review in front of honorees and guests. Ethan's hand remained on the pine rail. This is not about embarrassing you, he said. It is about not burying her path twice. Margaret looked toward the technical booth. Marina entered the server credentials. The ballroom screen went black, then displayed a single archived file marked not for use, with the checksum and morning timestamp visible beneath it. Victor turned toward the booth. That footage has not been authenticated. Adrian lifted the server log. It has now. The play icon appeared in the center of the screen, and Lily reached out from her wheelchair and placed one hand against the edge of Ethan's ramp as the original rehearsal video began to load. The rehearsal footage filled the ballroom screen. At 8:14 that morning, Lily Carter appeared at the eastern side of the stage, the blue ribbon visible behind her white wheelchair, as she asked where the accessible entrance was. A staff member spoke into a headset. Seconds later, Victor Sloan's recorded voice came through the ballroom speakers. Give her the award on the floor. A tight shot will look the same. No one moved. The projector fan whispered above the stage. Somewhere in the back row, a phone vibrated against a folding chair and stopped. Victor stared at the screen, one hand resting on the podium hard enough to whiten his knuckles. That was a preliminary conversation, he said. His voice had gone dry. There was no final determination. The video continued. The same staff member asked whether the east ramp would be restored. Victor answered, No. The sponsor wall is already approved. Keep her below the camera line until we decide. The timestamp matched the printed program. The server checksum matched the archived file. The assignment log showed Victor had received Lily's access request 6 hours before Ethan entered the building. Margaret Carter stepped into the center aisle. The footage is authenticated, she said. The design history is authenticated. The budget transfer is authenticated. The inspection failure is authenticated. Victor looked toward the technical booth, then toward the ballroom doors, as though procedure might still offer an exit. It did not. Adrian Vale placed the signed ramp test beside the Ensign stage log. Marina set the missing page and the transfer invoice beneath the podium light. Ethan remained beside the homemade ramp with one hand resting on its low rail. He did not smile. He did not look at Victor. He looked at Lily. Do you still want to use it? He asked. Lily took a breath. Yes. Victor stepped away from the microphone. If she proceeds, Mr. Brooks assumes responsibility for an unauthorized installation. Ethan took the liability form, read it once, and signed only the line covering his own workmanship. Adrian signed beneath him, certifying the independent load test. Then Ethan knelt exactly where the cameras could see him, pressed his palm against the unfinished pine, checked the anchor point, and tightened the final screw. Lily guided her front wheels onto the black anti-slip strip. A small snapping sound came from the handrail. Several people inhaled. Ethan found a decorative cord caught beneath the bracket, freed it, and ran his fingers over the joint again. "The structure is sound," Adrian said. Ethan moved aside. "The choice is hers." Lily pushed forward. Rubber rolled over wood with a soft, measured rhythm. The blue ribbon trembled behind her chair. Halfway up, she paused to reposition her hands. Ethan opened one palm beside the rail but did not touch the wheelchair. He would catch her if she asked. He would not take the climb from her. Lily pushed again. The room went silent enough to hear the faint hum of the LED wall and the click of a photographer lowering his camera. When her wheels reached the top platform, she turned toward the audience by herself. No one applauded at first. They could not. The image on the screen behind her showed the deleted ramp design beside the living proof of what one quiet carpenter had rebuilt from discarded wood. Victor's pen slipped from his fingers and struck the floor. Margaret walked onto the stage, but she did not embrace Lily for the cameras or lift the trophy into her hands. She faced the audience. Effective immediately, Victor Sloan is suspended from all event authority pending an independent investigation. All records are preserved. Marina Cole is protected as a reporting employee. Every Carter Meridian event will undergo a full accessibility audit beginning tonight. Victor opened his mouth, then closed it. There was no explanation left that did not contradict the files, the footage, the invoice, or the girl now sitting level with every other honoree. Ethan exhaled slowly. Caleb, standing safely beside Marina, pressed his father's steel tape measure against his chest and whispered, "She made it." Ethan looked at his son. "She chose it." Lily reached for the microphone but left the trophy untouched. "I did not need to be carried," she said. "I needed them to stop removing the road." The first applause did not rise like celebration. It came slowly, almost painfully, from people recognizing what they had accepted without seeing. Margaret looked down at Ethan beside the ramp. "Mr. Brooks," she said, "we owe you more than thanks." Ethan placed the signed form on the evidence table and stepped out of the light. "Then do not make this about me." The power in the room had finally shifted toward him, and the question now was what he would choose to build with it. The applause faded before the ballroom emptied, leaving behind the softer sounds of consequence. Folding chairs sliding back into rows, technicians preserving server files, paper seals pressed across equipment cases, and Victor Sloan surrendering his event credentials to an independent investigator. No one escorted him through the room for spectacle. Margaret Carter had made that clear. The evidence would decide what happened next, not humiliation. Lily's award record was corrected to show that she had received it on stage with the other honorees, and every photograph using the false floor-level backdrop was removed from the company archive. The next morning, Carter Meridian issued a public statement accepting responsibility for the deleted access plan, the transferred budget, and the failed inspection. Margaret signed her own name beneath it. She did not describe the problem as one employee's mistake. "A system allowed this," she told the board. "So a system must be changed." The independent audit connected every piece. The missing page, Victor's emails, the LED invoice, the rehearsal footage, the unsigned safety log, and the sentence recorded on Caleb's phone. Victor's management contract was terminated. Marina received formal whistleblower protection. 6 months later, Victor was permitted to apply for a supervised accessibility repair program, but not for a position with approval authority. The second chance did not erase the consequence. It required him to live inside the work he had once dismissed. Ethan asked for none of it. When Margaret offered him a large ceremonial check at a press event, he declined before the cameras were invited. "Pay the invoice," he said. "Fix the process." She did. The $64 hardware receipt was reimbursed as a legitimate project expense, along with fair compensation for Ethan's labor. The receipt, once folded beside a carpenter's pencil in his flannel pocket, was later placed in the audit file as proof that the ramp had been built before Ethan knew Lily's name, wealth, or connection to the company. It was no longer a scrap of paper showing what a struggling father had sacrificed. It had become a timeline of character. Margaret offered Ethan a permanent position on Carter Meridian's new Access Review team. He accepted only after Lily and 2 independent wheelchair users were given equal approval authority. "I can tell you whether a joint will hold," Ethan said. "They can tell you whether the design respects the person using it." That answer earned something deeper than gratitude. It earned Margaret's trust. She had watched him protect Lily's choice, Caleb's privacy, Adrian's independent judgment, and even Victor's right to face evidence instead of a public mob. She stopped seeing him as the poor carpenter who had saved her daughter's ceremony. She saw a man who understood responsibility when no one was watching. Lily joined the first review meeting at a long table built low enough for every chair to fit naturally beneath it. Margaret did not pull out a place for her or move her documents without asking. "How would you like me to help?" she said. Lily looked at her mother for a moment, then slid one folder across the table. "Start with listening." It was not a perfect reconciliation. It was better. It was honest. Caleb's new winter shoes arrived in a plain brown box paid for with Ethan's first project check. The boy sat on the edge of their kitchen chair, laced them carefully, and asked whether the company had given them as a reward. Ethan shook his head. "No, I did the work. They paid for the work." Caleb smiled, relieved by the difference. 1 year later, father and son returned to the convention center. The handmade pine ramp had been preserved near the service hall beneath a small brass plaque that read, "Built before permission, kept after the truth." Ethan ran his palm across the wood, over the flattened screws, and the dark anti-slip strips. Then he looked toward the main stage. A permanent access ramp now rose from the floor as part of the foundation, wide, quiet, and ordinary. Lily rolled up it without an announcement. No one lowered the lights. No one adjusted the camera to hide where she had begun. Margaret waited at the top and let her daughter choose the distance between them. Ethan had been offered a seat in the front row, but he stood at the back beside Caleb, his dented toolbox resting near his boots. "Do they remember you, Dad?" Caleb whispered. Ethan watched Lily cross the stage under the steady lights. "They remembered the road," he said. "That is enough." For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The silence was not shocked now. It was whole. The ramp remained where it belonged, asking for no applause, proving that quiet kindness does not disappear. Sometimes it simply waits until the truth gives it a place to stand.